Skyrim's most civilized hold doesn't even hit the 50% mark. No wonder Jarl Baldgoof hired Envy Ranger & Co. to answer a simple question. Just how civilized is Skyrim? Is there more of this? Or is there more of this? To find this out, Bill and I inspected nearly every marked location in the province and sorted them into one of three categories: civilized, wild, or gray. Our job is to rank every hold by a civilization rating, then we are going to look at the whole of Skyrim, and finally each of these Civil War factions to see whether the Stormcloaks or the Imperial Legion contain more civilized lands. The top three holds will receive a tax break and a large sum of gold, and the bottom three holds will be placed on a hold improvement plan or an HIP, and have their Jarls sent to the headsman. We're going to start off in the southeast and work our way northwest, which will bring us to the Rift first. The Rift is this perpetual autumn forest, and no, we're not going to count all the trees to figure out how wild this place is. The Rift is actually Skyrim's busiest hold, with a total of 79 locations accounted for. 40.5% were civil, 8.9% were considered gray, and 50.6% were considered wild. This gives it an adjusted civilization rating of 44.9%. The adjusted civilization rating is gathered when we split the gray locations between civil and wild evenly. This gives us a clear split between the more prominent sides of this conversation, which is civilization versus wilderness. Gray locations are spots like standing stones or shrines not within towns. We're giving them a gray label because they're a part of this civilization's culture or religion, but they're not necessarily within civilization itself. You also have a lot of the forts in-game being categorized as gray because they're originally inhabited by bandits or other baddies, but eventually one of the Civil War factions takes them over. The Rift seems like this peaceful place, but there are more dragon layers here than any other hold in Skyrim. It's three dragon layers here. Ooh. Really, it's the caves and Nordic ruins that have this place so out of control, and it makes you realize how much time you spend underground in Skyrim. Like all the time, you're always underground, you're always in something, inside, crawling around in a hole. If you're curious, even a place like the Thieves Guild is a part of civilization. It doesn't need to be good or safe or even legal to be an aspect of civilization. I wonder if the next few holds are gonna get more civilized. I bet not. Sulfur, cliffs, giants, Windhelm just trying to hold it together. Welcome to Eastmarch. We're trending down. This place is only 39.1% civilized. It has the most dragon mounds at a whopping 4, but it also has 10 caves, plus a lot of ruin heavy and giant heavy space. Somehow they managed to stick 3 farms in the snow, and they have quite a bit of mining going on in the hold. Now, one city such as Windhelm is not equal to one cave such as this hole. The city is obviously more relevant, but we don't just give it arbitrary bonus points, we look at other aspects of the city, like stables, docks, or even inns within the city. To Windhelm's benefit, it has segregation, which gave it 2 inns, making it even more civilized. Eastmarch is productive, it's populated, but it's buried under harsh terrain. It's gonna get worse though. Winterhold enjoyers are about to have a terrible day. This dinky little backwater is more national park than part of a nation. Only 20.5% of the locations in this hold are directly attributed to civilization. Another 20.5% are categorized as gray, leaving 59.1% of Winterhold as wilderness. That leaves us with an adjusted civilization of 30.7%. You can Winterhold these nuts so they don't freeze off in this dump. A major problem with Winterhold is that it has a bunch of unforced errors. Shipwrecks are lining its coastline. Not that I want to spend another minute here, but if I was Jarl, I'd work out a deal with the College of Winterhold. We'd take some mages down to the water, melt some of those ice caps, and set up some docks. That way, ships could come in and out safely, and this place would have an actual functioning economy. Under the current circumstances, you'd find more civilization Googling Sid Meier's. In a battle for who can be a more embarrassing pocket of civilization, we enter the Pale. It's a fitting name for a hold with a whopping 23.5% in civil locations. 15.7% of that goes to gray, and 60 8.8% of it is wild. This leaves us with a 31.4% adjusted civility rating. You genuinely might have a hard time figuring out who runs this hold because there are more giant camps here than any other part of Skyrim. It actually has a relatively small amount of caves, but it's being crushed by the past with Nordic and Dwemer ruins scattered all over the place. It manages to stay a bit more civil than Winterhold, but it really has an argument for being one of the worst places in Skyrim because not only does it have an incredibly hostile climate, but you also have a lot of its issues out and open on the surface with giant camps, dragon mounds, and things of this nature. Literally. It can be easy to look at the Pale and Winterhold as just other holds in Skyrim, but the truth is, these are wild frontiers with small bastions of civilization. We do have something of a trend, a pattern occurring. When the climate got worse, the wilderness grew. So let's see if going into the heart of Skyrim and Whiterun does us any better. Roads, trade, inns, farms, the economic hub of Skyrim is still kind of pathetic. 41.2% civil, 10.3% gray, 48.5% wild, leaving us with a 46.3% adjusted civilization rating. That's actually the best so far. It has the most inns in Skyrim, largely because the Drunken Huntsman actually counts as an inn. So you have 2 in Whiterun, you have 1 in Riverwood, and then you have another one in that other place, Rorikstead. It seems that Whiterun is saved by its geography because Skyrim is constantly trying to get you to go into a cave or a ruin shoved in the side of a mountain, which is hard to insert into a hold comprised of large grassy fields. That doesn't mean it doesn't have them. Definitely doesn't mean it doesn't have them. It just means there are less. If the center of the province can't break 50, you know it's definitely about to get better. Falkreath. Falkreath is really about to give Winterhold a run for its money. Beautiful forests, buried instability, and 19.7% civility. That's 10.6% gray and 69.7% wild, leaving us with a 25% adjusted civilization rating. That's only a fourth of this hold. It doesn't help that someone just burned down Helgen, its only town. That probably would have helped out a little bit. But it actually kind of makes sense that Falkreath is such a mess. Let me explain. Look at this. Falkreath's graveyard, we're actually giving the hold a civility point because of this place. Nothing says civilization like a bunch of dead bodies in the ground. Falkreath is known for being the site of a bunch of battles. It's traded hands between different nations. Perhaps the reason this place has such little civilization is because it's constantly being taken over and traded between different power groups. Maybe every time it tries to build itself up, war comes through and tears it back down. Regardless, Sidgeir should be very nervous right now. Entering the home stretch as we push further east into our final 3 holds, we find the Reach, perhaps the wildest in appearance at least. The Reach is pure chaos because not only do you have the Civil War factions vying for control, but you also have the Forsworn. You also have more orc strongholds here than any other hold. It's only 2, but it's, still true. This place is sliced up like a pizza pie, and that's not helping it. 31.5% civil, 9.6% gray, and 58.9% wild, with an adjusted civilization rating of 36.3%. And that's not for a lack of trying, because the Reach is one of Skyrim's most industrious holds. It has more mines than anywhere else. One of them was taken over, but even with losing that one, it still has more functioning mines. It's also just behind the Rift, having the second most locations of any individual hold. The problem is, it leads in some of the worst ways possible. You'll find more Nordic and Dwemer ruins here than any other place, even the Pale. You could definitely argue that point because Blackreach is up north, but because that area is spread across multiple holds and it's obviously underground, we didn't really give it additional weight in our inspection. The location distribution in the Reach actually tells the broader story of this hold. It has almost as many wild locations as Falkreath, but it has far more civil locations going on. There's a struggle between wilderness and civilization. Unlike Falkreath or Winterhold, which have pretty much just lost that struggle. Welcome y'all to Hjaalmarch, the hold with the least going on. There are even less locations here than in Winterhold. And similarly to Winterhold, it is dense with gray. The swamps here are murky in more ways than one. It's basically saved from slipping into last place by just having less. It's only 24.4% civil, 19.5% gray, and 56.1% wild with a 34.1 adjusted civilization rating. The place only has 4 caves, 4 Nordic ruins, a couple of dragon mounds, no farms, and no towns, just like its neighbor in the Pale. You could argue this makes it more wild, but I'm not arguing that, so keep that to yourself. Mess up my inspection, it's coming out of your pay. We'll send you to Brenda and HR. The Pale has the Loriest Farm. All I mean is these holds don't have towns like Riverwood or Dragonbridge. They have small mining settlements at best. This leaves us with one final hold. Can this be the bastion of civilization we've been looking for? The home to the Imperial Authority of Skyrim, Haafingar? No, it's 39.1% civil, 8.7% gray, and 52.2% wild with a 43.5 adjusted civility rating. There are some interesting Daedra in the details though. Half of its wild locations are caves alone, the most caves in Skyrim at 12 for a single hold. Haafingar is really small. It's probably the smallest hold in all of Skyrim when it comes to pure area, but somehow it still manages to have more locations than Hjaalmarch and Winterhold. The more interesting detail to me is the fact that it has the least number of gray locations. Again, a lot of the gray locations are shrines, testaments to the religious and cultural backbone of Skyrim. Haafingar being the seat of imperial power with a Thalmor presence, not having that backbone makes a lot of sense. Still, it's one of Skyrim's more developed holds, but it's dragged under 50, well below it, by sheer hostile terrain. The jagged cliffs leave way more room for caves and way less room for civilization to grow. I mean, just look at its capital in Solitude. One big bad wolf, and this place is Winterhold 2.0. Alright, the numbers are in. It's time to figure out which hold is getting a tax break and which Jarls are getting a headrest. In 9th place is Falkreath Hold. The first Jarl losing their head is Sidgeir. You will be punished for failing your people. In 8th place is Winterhold Hold. Jarl Courier. You will be punished for failing your people. In 7th place is the Pale. Jarl Skald. You will be punished for failing your people. Just escaping the bottom 3 by being as irrelevant as possible is Hjaalmarch in 6th place. Then you have the Reach in 5th and the home to the Stormcloak Rebellion, Eastmarch, in 4th. The bronze medal in civilization goes to the seat of the Imperial Legion in Haafingar, just beating out their rivals. Receiving silver in 2nd place goes to the Rift. And finally, in 1st place with a gold medal in civilization goes to the heart of Skyrim, Whiterun Hold. No wonder Balgoof is the one who wanted us to do this inspection. Kind of interesting because when we did the best city to live in assessment, it was Whiterun. When we did the best village to live in assessment, it was Riverwood, and both of those locations happen to exist in Whiterun Hold, the most civilized. Just a coincidence that my subjective opinions happen to be backed up by my biased research. Still, the winner of this entire competition is only 46.3% civilized based on our adjusted rating. Now for the real question, just how civilized is Skyrim as a whole? The results are not ideal. 31.2% of Skyrim is clearly civilized, 12.2% is gray, and 56.6%, over half of the nation, is wild. This leaves us with an adjusted civilization rating of 37.3. Not even 40% of this so-called province is civilized. That would actually place it in 4th place, just outside of the top 3 if we compared it to the individual holds. I guess, unsurprisingly, bandits, Draugr, dragons, giants, Forsworn, Falmer, deer, wolves, bear, and the rest, they really run the show here. What's even more crazy than perhaps anything I've said so far is the most common civil location are the various military camps involved in the Civil War. Meaning Skyrim is more civil because of the Civil War. Duh, I guess. The most common wild location was the cave, and the most common gray location, of course, was the shrine. Speaking of the Civil War though, this made me curious, which side in the Civil War is more civilized, the Imperials or the Stormcloaks? There's an interesting situation here, but the results are kind of baffling to me. The Stormcloaks control the East, that's the Rift, Eastmarch, Winterhold, and the Pale. Lucky them. The Empire controls the west. That's Haafingar, Hjaalmarch, the Reach, and Falkreath. Whiterun sits in the middle. Kind of. If Whiterun is excluded, the Empire is less civilized, 3.7% less so than Stormcloak territory, 37.8% versus 34.1%. If Whiterun were to fall to the Stormcloaks, they gain a whopping 5.6% advantage in civilization. The craziest part is that if Whiterun becomes Empire territory, perhaps we just consider it that from the start, the Stormcloaks still lead, albeit by 0.9%, but regardless, they are more civilized than the Imperials under any circumstance regarding Whiterun. So there's actually another way we can look at this data that I didn't think of when I started this project. I want to compare each hold's numbers to the rest of Skyrim. This actually changes things up. Unfortunately, we already cut all those Jarl's heads off, but somebody might have survived had we not had we looked at things a little bit differently. So while Whiterun is more civil within itself, the Rift actually has a larger percentage of Skyrim's overall civil locations. There are more civil locations in the Rift than are in Whiterun. This changes the dynamic quite a lot. Whiterun drops down into second place, but then we see the Haafingar is no longer in third place. The Reach and Eastmarch jump above it, and look at that below Haafingar. Falkreath isn't in last place. Instead, it goes the Pale, Hjaalmarch, and Winterhold is the least civil based on this method. The issue with this method, as some of you have already recognized, is that it's going to skew in favor of the holds with more overall locations. The Rift having the most locations suddenly jumps up into first place. That's not an accident. Whiterun has a lot of locations within it, and the Reach, again, that's the second most locations in the entirety of Skyrim are within the Reach. So that jumps up into third. Haafingar is a smaller hold, so it suddenly dropped out of the top three. We can still see that Falkreath hold is at the top of the wilderness game. It has the most of Skyrim's wilderness within it, even though it has considerably less locations than the Reach and the Rift, respectively. And we can see Hjaalmarch has the smallest percentage of Skyrim's wilderness within it, which one shows you why this method wouldn't make sense for our original purposes, and it also shows you the flaws with trying to figure out Skyrim's wilderness just by looking at these individual marked locations, because I think most of us could agree that Hjaalmarch doesn't have the least wilderness in it, and certainly not this small of a percentage, but it does end up at the bottom just because it has the least locations. And when we're looking at which hold has the largest percentage of gray locations in Skyrim, it's Winterhold, followed by Eastmarch and the Pale. To round things off, let's look at which holds take up what percentage of Skyrim's overall locations. Again, the Rift is number 1, followed by the Reach, Whiterun in third, Falkreath is actually in fourth, Eastmarch, the Pale, Haafingar, Winterhold, and again, Hjaalmarch. I'm sure some of you are curious about the methods used to gather the information for this video. All I did was use the very handy unofficial Elder Scrolls pages along with the Map Genie for Skyrim. The Map Genie allowed me to filter by each location, so I could look at all of the camps at once, or all of the towns at once, or all of the caves at once, and so on. Then I could see where those locations were actually placed and then assign them to each hold. Some of those locations could be pretty tricky when you get up to the borders between the holds, so instead of just using my eye and judgment, I used the Elder Scrolls pages, which actually list what hold each location is assigned to. Now sometimes that's bugged and it will have a location assigned to a hold it's definitely not in. In those cases, I looked where it was and used my judgment. I also note some people might be wondering, did you count every building in every town as an aspect to civilization? No, I didn't, because there are multiple cells within things like Nordic ruins or Dwarven ruins that aren't being counted towards wilderness. I did my best to just use distinct aspects or functions of a town, not every house, not every shop. There's also a lot of room for interpretation in fringe territory that makes this particularly difficult to assess. You might argue the roads are a part of civilization, but I don't know if you would think that if a wolf was gnawing on your leg while walking on one. Then again, a town is still a town, even if a wolf is gnawing on your leg in the town. And to be clear, just because a certain location is of a certain type doesn't mean it automatically gets considered as wild or civil. For example, in the far north in Winterhold, Septimus Cygnus's outpost is one of the few caves that is not a wild location. It's gray. He's not really out here a part of civilization, but he's also not just another part of the wilderness. Are the general results that Skyrim has more wilderness than civilization surprising? Obviously not. It's a game. It's not meant to serve that purpose. Also, given the genre and setting, it makes sense there as well. But the truth is, Skyrim is not a settled country with some wilderness around it. It's a wilderness with a few contested pockets of civilization trying to hold on.